Hey, 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 welcome to the Dr. Luke Show. I guess that's what we're calling it now, because that's what everyone calls me. Today, you'll notice that we have a special guest with us, Celine, who is a good friend of mine, who I have wanted to work with for a long time. And it jumped out to me while I was reviewing the material for this week. There was so much lunar symbolism, and of course, I was like, well, I have to get Celine to be a part of this. And of course, we have Ostic from northern India and Jordan. And as you can see, we are recreating characters from the Odyssey. Can you guess who I am? That's right. I'm Polyphemus. Well, I'll go around. Jordan, who are you?
Calypso.
Celine.
I couldn't decide between Penelope or Athena, but I guess I could be Athena.
I think it's got Athena vibes. I think it's got Athena
Yeah.
vibes. I'm going to call you Athena. And
Awesome.
Ostic?
I'm an extra. I'm a background
Well,
extra.
I was thinking, you could be nobody. Do you understand that reference if I were to say
Yeah.
you are nobody?
I'm nobody.
Because,
Nobody
right,
killed me.
because yeah, for those who don't know, when Odysseus blinds Polyphemus, the Cyclops, he tells Polyphemus that his name is Nobody or No Man or something like that. So you could be Odysseus and Nobody at the same time. Today we are going to be talking about chapters 30 or 29, 30, and 31. Let me get my glasses on here. I was joking beforehand that I need a monocle for my cyclopean eye. But we're going to be looking at chapter 29, the myth of Adonis, chapter 30, Adonis in Syria, and Adonis in Cyprus, which is chapter 31. This was quite the trifecta of chapters. It's pretty dense. And there were so many details that I'm going to violate a rule of mine. I actually, for introducing some of the chapters, I composed a little paragraph just to situate us to make sure I hit all the high points. And if you're unfamiliar with the show and what we try to do here, in general, we are following along with the chapters in the Golden Bough, but I'm also layering on top of it. And really today throughout, it's going to be peppered, is my archetypal psychohistory takes on the United States space program, which it has expanded all the way back to the Trinity test and really all the way to the present day with the Artemis moon landings that keep shifting, which is going to be one of the first things that we talk about. So stick around. I'm going to talk about some of the images here on the title card and what you can expect for the next 2 hours. But before I do that, does the cast want to say anything?
Excited to have everyone here. Thank you, Luke, for instituting dress-up themes. I think it's really added some showmanship value and fun.
Good. I may lose some army men here. So, I was thinking about this while I was laying awake this morning, and I haven't had a chance to research it, but I want to make a note of it right now. When I was reviewing the character Polyphemus from the Odyssey, Odysseus has 12 men that go to the island that Polyphemus is on. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, the number 12, of course, we have the 12 moonwalkers, we have the 12 disciples, we have the 12 knights of the round table, we have the 12 archetypes. Here we go again, right? And I think there's something really interesting about that. And then I was reminded of the cannibalism. That's why I'm covered in these army men. I'm going to eat them, right? The cannibalism of Polyphemus. Does that sound familiar to you guys? Like anything else we've talked about during the course of this Golden Bough study in my book research?
The 12 or the cannibalism specifically?
The cannibalism by the Cyclops. Mm. Well, it's Jack and the Beanstalk. Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman.
Right.
So I wonder if Jack and the Beanstalk is somehow related to the story of the Cyclops in the Odyssey. So if someone wants to look into that and pin it below, I'd appreciate that. I'll try to address that next time.
Mythologems, is that our vocab word?
Mythologem, yes. It's an expression of the underlying archetype. Right.
I have to keep repeating it because it's not.
That's okay. We got new people here.
I like that.
Yeah, and not to mention, this is obviously connected to 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'll let Ostic handle that one, right? With Hal.
Oh my God.
Yeah, with Hal, right, and Bowman as Odysseus, who is shutting down Hal. So we have that element to this too. So let's go around to some of the images on the title card here. I'm going to use my copy so I can zoom in a little bit better. As the itemized chapters go, clearly we're going to be talking about Adonis. I did not know very much about Adonis prior to doing this presentation, and now I've known more than ever. And what I learned in that process makes me think that the image of Adonis, we've talked about all these different solar figures that latch on to the persona of JFK. And I think for many people who want to say that the Golden Bough is somehow relevant in the JFK assassination, it makes sense that JFK would be an Adonis type figure given what Frazer has to say. And that's why I've put his head on this image of Adonis and Venus. And therefore, it would follow that Marilyn Monroe, as the modern Aphrodite, would be Venus in this picture. But we'll get deeper into the details of that. Something I think is interesting is that there is, if you go deep into the mythology, something I was trying to explain to Jordan this week, and really probably everybody already knows, is that mythology is not canonical. This person was related to that person, had these parents, da-da-da. You know, I'm not some expert in it, but clearly there's an evolution to these myths, right? And certain ones stabilize and we think we know the story, but there are all these other contributing voices that are perhaps lesser that we don't know about. And when you go deeper into some of that material, there are very unusual relationships between Adonis and Apollo. And so I want to look at some of that today, like some of those side quests or those side stories. We're going to be looking to begin this today. We're going to be looking at some of the manifestation of the symbolism that I talked about last week with the Orion capsule and the Artemis program. I think Celine just got back from a tour of a space center, so she can tell us a little bit more about what's going on down at Kennedy. In previous episodes, I have mentioned the uncanny similarities and phenotype between JFK and Jimmy Carter. And I've thought about this. I've been listening to Jesse Weston's From Ritual to Romance, which is about the Grail legend and expanding upon it via the work of Frazer. And I wonder about those uncanny similarities, if they can be somewhat explained in terms of Arthurian legend, specifically when King Arthur is wilting and dying, and thinking about the 70s before the Restoration, the drinking from the Grail again. And as anyone who's been following along with the past couple of weeks, we've been watching a lot of the Gilmore Girls, and I've been having this real life mirroring or whatever that's going on in the Gilmore Girls, and perhaps the most uncanny synchronicity to date. Rory Reed starts an episode reading James Joyce's Ulysses. If you've been following along, we've talked ad nauseum about the significance of Marilyn Monroe reading Ulysses. So we'll maybe get into some of the symbolism of that. I wanted to think about golf. We've talked about playing golf on the moon, revisiting that particular sport and its role in a vegetation ritual. And we're going to be looking at this fractal that involves Charlie Duke putting an image of his family on the moon during Apollo 16, and how it's connected to the Grateful Dead, Louis Pasteur, and potentially Where's Waldo. So if any of those topics intrigue you, stick around.
Yeah.
I'm excited. The Gilmore Girl, every time we're like, oh, this will be fun.
Yeah.
This will be not work related.
Yeah, it's become a source of research. I'm in some sort of dynamic conversation with the show. I mean, they have a Luke on the show that dispenses coffee, right? Which is, I think, a symbol for waking up. And then we have all the performative reading, which I've latched onto as a symbol that's put in these films and movies about things that you need to check out. And it's really not disappointed in that way. So that must sound crazy to people who are not like tapped into this like collective dream understanding of reality that we participate in. But I'm just telling you what I'm seeing. And I have a big eye on my forehead. Okay. Are we ready to get going here?
Let's go.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go to Selena. I think you're going to be heavily involved in this first one here.
I'll try my best.
In previous episodes, really last time, I was diagnosing some of the mythological symbolism that's involved in the different mechanics and parts that the Artemis lunar landing is going to involve. And I cautioned, and I perhaps wanted to bring attention to, because I don't want anything bad to happen. There's something ominous about the capsule that's associated with the Artemis mission named Orion. I have concerns that the Artemis mission is not going to be successful, which is potentially borne out by the fact that it keeps getting delayed. And I said last episode, one of the reasons why I'm concerned about this is not only because there seems to be something about cosmic conception that's involved in these different moon landings, and Artemis is an eternal maiden. But one of the reasons why she's an eternal maiden is because either through her own arrow or through the revenge of Gaia, um, Orion dies prematurely. And I'm concerned about the Orion capsule. And wouldn't you know, I went to go check on the how Artemis is doing. And I said last time, okay, they're going to do some sort of flyby of the moon in February. That seems to be on track. I also said that we're going to have a moon landing in September. That is no longer on track. It has been moved all the way to mid 2027 or now 2028. And one of the main problems that they are experiencing, wouldn't you know, I'm not saying I'm a prophet or anything like this, but I've been saying there's a problem with Orion. Look at this, where I have those arrows pointing, the Orion heat shield. And to be honest, it's not something that I'm unfamiliar with. They've been working on this Orion heat shield forever and ever. I've known that it's an issue largely because of the Van Allen radiation belts and getting through them, et cetera, et cetera. But apparently the heat shield with Orion is charring. Okay. I would, just looking at this from an archetypal psychohistory perspective, I would say, let's rethink everything. This is not good. So I wanted to point that out. And what's interesting to me is that they moved this to 2027. I could have sworn last week that I had done my due diligence and that it was going to launch in September of 2026. But apparently they moved it, I don't know, last year. But I don't know. It feels a little re-rendered to me. So 2027, 2028 is now the landing date. So Celine, I'll let you, since you're named after a lunar figure and you've been to the JFK Space Center soon, what do you have to say about this?
Well, it's so much deeper than just landings, right? Like, I'm sure you guys know about these alien groups. I don't know if it's okay to talk here, but
I'll tolerate alien stuff. Sure, why not? What do you know about aliens?
Yeah, Orion groups. These black suns, the whole Belial groups, Octagon group, the World Economic Forums. Basically, the moon is their breeding ground. It is a satellite moon that was inserted a while back, and we fixed that already with grid working. The original moon was Selene, and now it's like Pangaea, and it changes the planet's polarity to keep it on a tilt, and it messes up with our seasons, time, circadian rhythm. It messes with our hearts, and basically it's like a loosh for harvesting. So these groups, a lot of it is the antichrist stuff, and they use these technologies for human enslavement, and it's so much that goes on, like the geopolitics of like the spiritual warfare that we're on. And yeah, basically the Orion group is kind of one of the main groups that are leading this thing.
I've got to, this is all new information to me. And look, I've seen enough weird stuff that I try to keep an open mind, but is there like a certain person that's like channeling this information, or a bunch of different people channeling this information and getting this information about Orion aliens and stuff like that?
Well, you get to a point in your ascension that you start to experience things, you start to process things, you go into land masses, you go into like these different parts of the world where you do grid work, and you literally see like a whole vision of, you get downloaded. We work with Aurora hosts. There's a lot of councils that communicate with you, and really embracing our multidimensionality. So oftentimes when I go do grid work, there's like different people that I work with. It's just synchronicities. You follow the dots, you follow kind of the signs, and you get instructions of like what unfolds, and then you see it in your simulation, you see it in the world around you to confirm. So yeah, basically that's what
What
happens.
interesting. What was your experience like at the Kennedy Space Center recently?
So for a while, we've been really trying to fix time because this also ties with CERN. There's like reversal currents on top of Svalbard. So Svalbard is where Gaia's crown is. Think of Gaia as this whole like being. It's her body. And when we suppress a lot of these energies in her kundalini, such as in Africa, that's her root. And a lot of times these negative alien groups, they would do all kinds of stuff in her matrix to create lesions, create wormholes, and these entities can go in and out of Gaia's body. And we fix that, we repair it. It's so enmeshed. There's so much kind of myth and like 3D that is overlaying the
Mhm.
whole Metatron stuff, Ezekiel, King Arthur. Like this is like the whole history of humanity, and tracing all of that is like it'll make you crazy.
No, you're great. You're great. Well, we'll be bringing in. We have some of the topics today. We'll talk about Tammuz a little bit, which actually appears in the book of Ezekiel briefly, where it's described that Tammuz is being wept by some women at a gate there, and there will be some King Arthur things that we talk about too. Do Astic or Jordan, do you want to weigh in on this delay on the Artemis missions at all? Or you're not surprised, or you're like, yeah, or did I get it right? Am I getting it right? I don't know.
I mean, your hypothesis was it's not gonna exactly happen in a successful way, but maybe something Celine is bringing in here is what does success mean and to who?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is there's probably a lot of competing perspectives on that, but just looking at it on face as an observer of the movie of the space missions, maybe as like an American citizen, if that makes sense. I think that's kind of what your hypothesis was structured around, Luke. Like those are not going to be a success.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and so
Even if it's not a success in terms of, oh, they don't show a moon landing on CNN, it could be in what what Selena's talking about, success in another way.
Mhm.
mhm, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a big part of like what we do is really about fixing time and Gaia's geomagnetic of her body. And yeah, these missions, it's kind of like a hub for them, and it emits signals and all kinds of stuff. So
How would you describe your worldview, Celine? This is something that I don't come
Mhm.
across like through my academic material. How would you label your perspective if you could? Like I
Mm,
know it's difficult. Like I've like only
yeah.
through a lot of diligent work, I've been like, I guess I'm an archetypal psychohistorian, but I before that I generated a title called hyper associative mythic mapping, and we got that from Chat GPT. But the archetypal psychohistorian stuff I got from Edward Edinger, and I really kind of backed myself into that. Do you have a name for your perspective?
Oh man, like a lot of what I know is just gnosis. These are
Isn't it?
my lived experiences with the things that I've recalled. And you were, in fact, the very first one who awakened me to everything moon. Remember? I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. And I was going through my awakening. My whole life was just in shambles. And then you kept talking about the moon. The moon. It's like, what is the moon? And then like I had like a really big epiphany awakening then, because Luke illuminates. And
Oh, yeah, that's true.
um
That's
yeah, a big part of my life is these moon chain lineages, basically like women that are hybridized, and they do a lot of genetic mutations, checkerboard mutations, that they would invert these Christic DNAs, and that's why our DNA is so messed up. So we're returning these 114,000,
mm.
Christos to we're going through these alchemical process now, the Negredo, to go from matter to spirit.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, we do talk about those alchemical movements. Well, I'm sure it'll come up throughout. Osik, do you want to weigh in here before we go to the next slide?
This is all just brand new information for me. Like what? What
Yeah,
is he
I was like,
talking about?
Me too, man. Me too. I'm trying to absorb it all.
This
All
is
right, let's go to
One
the
day you'll meditate, Luke.
one day.
are you familiar
Yeah.
with it, Jordan?
I would say my direct experiences aren't exactly the same in terms of like the details,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. But the overall arc, and I think like the frequency of what you are saying, yes. I wouldn't describe it exactly the same way, if that makes sense. But
Yeah.
that's just because you have your own personal kind of gnosis with it. I have my own
Mhm.
personal relationship with it. And yeah, so I'm super excited to talk to you about it more.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what happens here is like it's translating into different vocabularies. Whereas, like, what exactly are archetypes, right? Like, we start talking about, I speak about them as like being sort of like spiritual entities in a way. Okay, let's go to the next slide if we can, because we've got a lot to cover here. I just thought this was utterly bizarre. I think Osik is going to appreciate this. We're getting back into 2001. The Department of Energy this week announced that, because of course, as they're making all these Artemis announcements, they're going to tell you about this, because I guess the idea is to build a moon base with Artemis, and they are going to put nuclear fission reactors on the moon. And wouldn't you know that the shape that they have to take, they have to be monoliths. They have to invoke the monolith from 2001. There are actually 4 different monoliths in 2001, one of which they dig up on the moon. They did this is the Department of Energy. I cannot express how important this Department of Energy is. And especially since some of the topics that we touch on occasionally, we've talked about we talk about nuclear weapons and the fusion and fission of atoms. We talk about moon landings. I'm even open to talking about the QAnon stuff, because it does feed into this archetypal return pressure that is associated with JFK, and it all kind of gets mixed together here with these. I mean, they have their reasons for why they have shaped them like monoliths. Oh, the aesthetic, sleek design. But anyone who's working for NASA Department of Energy has seen 2001, and they have maybe they're just like not acknowledging it, and like it's just coming out, like it's just like their little nerd like sci-fi fantasy is like woven its way into the engineering department, or maybe they're trying to tap into some sort of familiarity with the film, like to be like, hey, we got to do this because this will be the next stage of human evolution. To me, it seems so like I haven't gone into the science of it all, but it really just looks like some intern punched some stuff into Chat GPT and say, hey, we need like a fission reactor on the moon. Can you make it look like the monolith? Like, what are we doing here? What do you guys think we're looking at here? Osik, I'll let you go first, since you're probably most familiar with the film.
I mean, these people, I think, even during the moon landing missions, when they would record back to the base, they would say, "Oh, this is just like 2001." This is what they will say, the actual
Yeah.
astronaut. So it's like maybe it's so ingrained in their imagination that they do not even need to acknowledge it anymore. But it's a very bizarre thing. And Department of Energy, I also heard this talk about the word energy is being used a lot of times in different contexts. I saw an interview. I think I shared it with you guys as well. That the guy who was the head of Google for a number of years is talking about we have to invest our energies into bringing about this artificial intelligence. That word energy, it has a lot of connotations. So I'm thinking about it in that terms, that when they're using the term Department of Energy, they're talking about something like what direction humankind should take. This is what energy means for them. It's not like just numbers on a chart. It's like energies to make something happen. So that is happening on Earth. That artificial intelligence is happening on Earth, and now they're simultaneously planning all this on the moon. This is bizarre, actually. This is,
Do you think that I'll open up to all of you. Do you think they know what they're doing when they put out images like this, or do you think it's like, oops, we accidentally recreated 2001 here? What do you guys think?
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious, these agencies, NASA, they're just the front of what goes on in the back. And they have so much technology that we can even fathom. But who knows?
Well, yeah, I think this raises interesting questions about what is technology. And we'll get into this the conversation with about Adonis. One of the things that we like I think I've expressed this elsewhere. I don't need to dwell on it. I think they have I think like things like I think we are so simultaneous. I think there are two tiers. I think the technology that we are promised and told about is largely propaganda and not real, and then the real technology is suppressed and it's not, and maybe something that comes out to us gradually. Okay, so there's like an inner sanctum of knowing, and then there's all the uninitiated on the outside, and when the security risk has been minimized, it gets passed on to us. Like God knows how long they've actually had these LLMs. I mean, they made war games in what, 1983 or something like that. Like I think it'd be safe to say they probably had some version of an LLM for like 50 years before we got it. So I tend to think that this fission reactor on the moon this isn't real. This isn't going to happen. I don't know what this is. I don't know what I'm looking at. Outside of perhaps an intentional uh, attempt to like steer the masses in some way. I mean, people were even commenting on it, like, what are you doing here? Like, I don't know. Or maybe it's just like they're so mixed up in it they can't even understand what they're putting out.
It could also be like, all these pressures the current US regime is facing from the inside. So it could be a way to steer attention towards, oh, we're doing a space, we're bringing back Kennedy's optimism. So it could be that kind of cover story. But that's a political, like, I mean, what Celine said, that 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 goes a bit too deep for my mind to wrap around it. But yeah, it's like they're not even they pretend to be independent organization like NASA. They wouldn't even say that our government is telling us to do it. It's like it's happening parallel to the US policy, internal policy, or whatever policy. So it's like an independent organization. When you look at it, it's like, oh, it's happening all over again. But you it does not assert its connection with the political elite in that way, does it? I don't see it. I don't see them asserting any connection with Trump the way they did with Kennedy, you know so it's like that's a it's less. I mean, it feels very weird. I don't know
Yeah.
why I'm saying it's
Well,
making any sense.
thinking about it, it is consistent with the overall sci-fi stuff that is involved with the Trump administration. I mean, with COVID, they had Operation Warp Speed, which is a clear reference to Star Trek. We have the Space Force. Like, I wonder if this is like the simulation just showing its hand, being like, "Yeah, you live inside a movie. Like this is all just set design. Your favorite movies, yeah, you're living in them." Now, I think that might be something way deeper than just like, oh, you live inside a fake reality. I think there's probably a deeper layer to that, but maybe that's just tipping the hand. Like, yeah, everything's fake,
Yeah, I mean,
but also
the
really
whole
real.
sorry, the whole Orion is basically the Star Wars movie, the Orion Wars.
Interesting.
And basically their hub is 10D, which is Iran. A lot of the industrial complex is there.
Hmm. I'll have to look into it. Jordan, you want to say anything before we move on?
I think I'm good to keep moving forward.
All right,
Yeah.
let's push forward
Just
here. Oh,
one.
Osik.
Okay. One thing I've been thinking about, in terms of what the current administration thinks, like they don't think like normal people do. It's like if you've attended the lectures of Peter Thiel, like what do you think? How he interprets the Bible? That's a completely bizarre understanding of what's really going on. So maybe they're putting on monoliths, thinking that this is supposed to be the next gen evolution. Like it's a sci-fi nerd kind of thing. But like we have discussed it before, a lot of theorists have discussed that the monolith is not actually a monolith. It's actually a movie screen. It's actually a projection of our own imagination and our own witnessing of our own lives and everything. But yeah, these people, they have a different idea of, it's like it's uh, they do not have access to, the real ground truth. They invent their own truth, and because they're in power, they're able to, create that truth. They're going to make it happen. It's like some years down the line, people will not even associate the monolith with being a movie screen. They will literally associate it with, these fusion reactors on the moon or something. So it's
Mm.
like they have the power to make things happen. Even does not matter where this originated. Does not matter Kubrick thought of them as some kind of a, satanic device or something, or like an evolution, whatever. They will interpret it and they will create it, and what they'll set it up is what we will have to, go forward with. This is the new meaning now. They have, it's like a supplanting. It's like creating a counterfeit of an original, is a and then, replacing it.
Something else that might be relevant to this is that Kubrick said that the monolith was something like a god image too. But thinking about that in this context is something I still have to get my mind around. All right, let's get into the golden bough material. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's a
All
bit
right.
like the gr-
Yes, Jordan?
well, I think Austin makes a great point. It's a bit like the Grail is just an easy example of how there's just tons of different dimensions and layers and perspectives and even projected images onto the Grail about what it means. The monolith is seemingly very similar.
That's an interesting idea. What if the monolith is like the Holy Grail? It's hard to say what the Holy Grail is as we've kind of been putting this all together. And what if somehow, like, I'm making light of these fission reactors, but what if there's more to the story than them just being like a prop in this hallucination that we're all experiencing, and that somehow it feeds into this restoration that the Holy Grail is a part of, that we've looked
Hmm.
at, especially with the Philosopher's Stone.
Some
I like that. I like that.
Something that my friend Anna wrote recently is how everyone kind of has their own lane that they play in to arrive at truth and to arrive at kind of their own consciousness expanding. And no matter what you view the Grail as, no matter what you view the monolith as, or whatever myth you're engaging in, they're all kind of taking you ultimately to a similar place, but we're all at different kind of points. If you think about a sphere, I guess, and everyone trying to arrive at the middle, everyone's at these all different entry points. So it can feel like these myths are very different, but I think ultimately they have a similar alchemical function.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. All right, let's talk about Adonis a little bit. So I did not know very much about Adonis, and to make sure, I've got the major features that are going to be relevant for the Frazer that we're going to talk about. I'm going to just read this little paragraph here to make sure I hit them all. So Adonis was a beautiful youth associated with vegetation, seasonal renewal, and fragile life. He was born from the myrrh tree after his mother Mira, cursed by Aphrodite to desire her own father, King Sinros, was transformed to escape discovery. When the tree split open, Adonis emerged, already marked by death and rebirth. Aphrodite hid the child in a chest and entrusted him to Persephone in the underworld. But Persephone also fell in love with him and refused to give him back. Zeus ruled that Adonis would spend part of the year below with Persephone and part above with Aphrodite, explaining the annual dying and returning of vegetation. As a young man, he was killed by a wild boar while hunting, and from his blood sprang red anemones. Each year, his death was ritually mourned and his return celebrated through lamentations, gardens of fast growing plants, music, and ecstatic rites, making Adonis one of the clearest ancient images of nature's recurring death and renewal. All right. So we can thank ChatGPT for that little summarization there. But I think I think that effectively captures all of it. And like I said, when I open this, there are lots of apocryphal, non-canonical takes of who Adonis was. And we're going to get layers to this, exactly how Adonis interacted with the environment, if the priest kings who and how they related to him, what the relationships were, and the temples of the sacred prostitutes. It all creates a very interesting ecosystem. And this gets into the whole idea of what is technology. When you have, and we're going to look at it, when you have the earth itself kind of uh, carrying out what is believed to be this vegetation, right? And then you have people in the temples and the different sacred sites carrying out extensions of that. Um, the entire environment starts to function together in a way. Even the music that's involved in these different ceremonies, if you view music, perhaps metaphysically, is a form of I guess you could say it's a type of technology that induces a certain state in the individuals, and then it creates a feedback loop that affects the environment. Like so much that we've talked about with this different Golden Bough studies, that the imitative magical rites that we've looked at here are really just primitive science. And really, until a different paradigm comes along to displace this, and people grew older, gained experience, drew on the knowledge of other tribes and other countries and things like that, where this is going on, these rituals worked for people for a very long time. And for them, it was a science, and it was an exact science that had to be attended with solemnity and attention to detail, as, I don't know, dissecting a cat in high school biology, or making sure you titrate the right thing in your college chemistry class. It was that serious. So, okay. Let's go to I think the next slide is largely I'll read this, and this will help us get a little deeper understanding of the chart here that I have on 640. Human societies face a recurring existential problem. Seasonal cycles repeatedly erased and restored the conditions of life, their survival dependent on their return. Early cultures responded through ritual action rather than explanation, attempting to influence rain, crops, animals, and fertility through sympathetic magic, where imitation was believed to produce real effects. As understanding evolved, these practices were not replaced but reframed, and the rhythms of nature were personified as gods united, weakened, died, and returned in step with vegetation itself. From this emerged the dying and rising gods of the Eastern Mediterranean, such as Tammuz, Osiris, Adonis, and Adonis. In Babylonian myth, Tammuz's death brought universal sterility until Ishtar's restoration revived life, while Greek tradition preserved the same logic by dividing Adonis's year between Persephone and Aphrodite. Ritual mournings, sacred sexuality, music, and renewal ceremonies thus function not as superstition, but as survival technology, converting biological vulnerability into symbolic order and rendering death a phase within continuity rather than annihilation. Right. So we've so Tammuz is largely the figure that is grounding all of this. There's some debate about whether or not Adonis is a proper name or it was a title that was given to a type of god. You see this in the Bible, where God is sometimes, or Lord is sometimes referred to as Adonai, which I imagine is connected to Adonis. I'm losing my army man at the moment. But you can see like the general idea, right? Like, I think the idea is that initially they were doing these magical rites where they felt like they were the ones bringing in summer and bringing in winter. And we've talked about this in previous Slavic countries, where they would create the effigies and carry death out to make sure that no one would get contaminated, and they could ensure fertility and husbands and things like that in the future. Well, we see the same thing going on in these regions. And in time, they realized that there was a force behind it all. And they started to give it a personifying God image, and Adonis or Tammuz or Osiris or Addis is going to be the one. Now, we're not going to talk about Tammuz and Addis and Osiris too much today. Those are for future chapters. I mean, we're primarily concerned with Adonis. And that's where this whole elaborate abstract theology starts to come from, with Adonis and Aphrodite and being slayed, and the connection to the land, where the rivers start to run red with the blood of Adonis every year. So I think it's an intriguing development in mythology and religion, and it really wasn't a problem for the magical rites to coincide with the abstract religion that is developing. So I'll pause there for a second. I've been reading and pontificating, but let's get a little bit of feedback from the cast here.
Did you say Red River?
Yes. I have some
Yeah.
images that I'll share here in a little bit. I mean, this happens all over the world for a variety of
Mhm.
different reasons: erosion, excess minerals in the water, algae blooms, and things like that. But there's a particular site. I have to have it in front of me to be able to pronounce it in Lebanon that we'll be looking at here shortly.
In Full Metal
Can I
Jacket, also there is a reference to Red River. I mean, when they're walking
Is there
around,
really? What's the
they call it
reference?
the Perfume River, but it's like supposedly Red River because I think in Vietnam they what they do is they create these incense sticks that are very red in color, very bright. I don't know. I think there's some association with the Red River because also okay, the movie is about the war and blood and everything. So I already
Yeah.
associated with the Red River, and also there was a movie made in 1948 called The Red River by Howard Fox, and there was some references to that movie in Full Metal Jacket. So I associated the Red River thing with that river. But yeah, I mean the Red River in The Shining. That's the thing. The
Oh
elevator,
yeah,
Red River.
yeah. No, that's right. That's
So
right. That really
there's that.
puts a whole different take on it, doesn't it?
I've been having
Yeah, I don't
dreams of
know.
that too.
That
So
I have never heard anyone make. I mean, that's a part of what we're doing here. I don't think I've ever heard anyone connect the elevator of blood
Mhm.
from The Shining to the Adonis's Red River. And I think knowing that, look, my interest in Kubrick got this whole thing started. I and he was the one that recommended the Golden Bough to his friend at the head of MGM. And that's I was like, well, if it's good enough for Kubrick, it's good enough for me. And so we're here. So that tracks, Ostic. That feels right to me.
yeah, I mean there another this it is a polyvalent image. It could be a waterfall, it could be a river of blood, it could be some, we talked about it could be nuclear blast or something. But it's like it's a sublime image of being
It is.
engulfed by nature or by it's like natural forces of very sinister engulfing everything.
Th- Yeah. Yeah, there you go. It's from my Adonis and Syria chapter. Might as well just look at the caption on it. Jordan, can you read that while I pull it up? I got that from
Sure.
Twitter. This guy. Yeah.
In ancient Mediterranean, Adonis was killed by a jealous god changed into a boar. As he died in the arms of Aphrodite, his blood spilled, turning red the runoff from snowmelt in the Mount Lebanon. Sorry, in 2018 AD, Red River flows are driven by the uncontrolled dumping.
That's interesting. That is interesting. And I mean, this raises an interesting question about the caretaker in The Shining. If he is like this,
He's
if
a
he is some
boar.
sort of sacred king the sacred king that is sacrificed and connected to the cult of Adonis. So you could have that adds an interpretive lens to that movie that would
Mm.
potentially make sense.
Yeah, I'll look into it.
Yeah.
I thought it while I was saying it. Um, there was something else I wanted to say. Okay, yeah, you mentioned when with King Arthur, how did he die? Did he die like drinking something, or
Well,
he got a
he
head wound
so
and then he was drinking something? You mentioned.
well, so I'm not some expert on Arthurian legend. I think Celine might know as much as I do, so
Yeah.
I'll let
I
her.
want to share
But
something.
oh yeah, well, just correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to step aside here and let you talk. But um, when we watched Excalibur like a week and a half ago, and when Arthur discovers the affair between Guinevere and Lancelot, he throws his sword down in between them and loses the power of Excalibur and enters into like a wilting phase, and the land enters into the wasteland, and then the Grail Knights go on the quest, and they ultimately are able to revive him by returning the Grail, and the land is in wasteland for a while, but he then his son via his sister, I believe Mordred is his name. They end up mortally wounding each other, and Arthur is taken away to Avalon, and there's the expectation that he will be healed and return one day. That's my understanding, but Celine might be able to tell it better or add some details.
Yeah, I just want to go back to Adonis, right? And I don't know
Sure.
if you're familiar to the triple goddess, where I
Yes,
feel like
Hecate.
Adonis is how he learns to like move through the desire, loss, and the return, and almost like this rhythm that passes through the body of the world. And Adonis is this beautiful, vulnerable access that this is how kind of the cycles turn. And he is the god of permanence, but this intensity of the inevitable wounding. So his division between Aphrodite and Persephone kind of completes this triadic structure, and Aphrodite loves him, and Persephone claims him into the underworld where time slows and his identity dissolves. But
Yes.
it together they form almost like a living circuit between life and death emergence.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, you get it. You understand.
So the triple goddess reveals herself not as three women, but alongside almost like a movement through realms. And again, this whole theme of bringing back Sophia, the maiden, opens life through the attraction and possibility. Where there's war, there's always beauty. And same with Odyssey, right? Like, same story, but Arthur, um, there is this big emphasis on Yeshua, but there are several figures in history. Like Arthur has this large dragon consciousness where the Albion, which was England, was called. They have this light body. The diamond sun is this Christic DNA, and basically he's coming back where his consciousness is getting restored for the humanity to come back to their original home, basically.
Yes, I see people talk about this in some way. And we've hit on this in some ways. Like there are these elements of King Arthur that descend upon JFK and Christ
Mhm.
and the dying and rising of Adonis again with JFK. And that's what I've contended, that there is this, whether people know it or not, there seems to be this expectation of a return. And what that means is, like, I think we even talked about this last time. It was like, do we expect like a 117-year-old or a 109-year-old JFK to show up again? Or are we talking about JFK being a time traveler? Like, what are we talking about? Are we talking about that? You know,
Yeah, I think it's
this
the
gets,
consciousness of the
yeah,
divine masculine will and truth, right? Because we've been in this very capitalistic type of mentality, and like the inversion of what the masculine is supposed to be, which is to protect, to provide, and to be in service of the feminine. And that's been inverted. So
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, a big role of this too is something I was trying to get my mind around, and I'll talk about it a lot, I think, in the future. And Osic's been wonderful on this podcast because he's like, "What about this?" I'm like, "I'm not super comfortable talking about that just yet." And then, oh, of course, we're going to end up talking about it forever. But I mean, where this is all going is with JFK Jr., right? Because he is the son of Adonis. If JFK is Adonis, and what does that mean? And he's potentially inhabiting other archetypes too. It specifically, the one that I will talk a little bit about today is Icarus.
mm,
So he seems to be kind of there's something
the
going on
fallen.
there. Yeah, right. We'll get into that, but yeah, I mean, we'll get into that. Jordan, do you want to weigh in here before we get back on track?
Oh, a funny share. I had a poster of Aragorn that I got at the school book fair that my mother laminated for me. But that is probably the most the story I'm most familiar with of Return of the King, and then the marriage too with the immortal elf, right? Like it's kind of I don't know. It's a story of that unification of the divine feminine and the divine masculine, and the return of the Christed consciousness in material form, and the return of man. I think the whole one step for mankind kind of
Ooh,
flows into this as well, right?
Mhm.
These things are not about, it's not about King Arthur, it's not about JFK. They are figureheads of, as Celine said, this larger movement that's happening. It's just a physical manifestation of it that we can all see. in the movie. And then as humans see things out in the world, it shifts their beliefs, it shifts their frequency, it shifts what they think is possible even within themselves. But Lord of the Rings for me
Yeah.
was a very
Mm,
high impact myth as a kid.
Mhm.
yeah. I'm sure it's all relevant here.
I like that Jordan summarizes everything.
Yeah, she does. She does. She's very good at that.
Yeah.
Well, you all provide the insights.
Yeah.
So
All right. So let's
just
go. Are
one.
we at? Yeah, go
Uh,
ahead. I think we're on slide 641, if that's
since
right,
we're talking
Jordan.
about rivers, I thought that since I was studying Finnegan's Wake for a while, so I thought the novel itself begins with river run, the word river run. So it begins with the beginning of a river. I mean, in that book, the river is associated with the feminine, and it's providing life all around the city, and the city is supposed to be masculine, and that's another thing. But I thought about, okay, I thought you mentioned King Arthur getting a head wound. Finnegan also gets a head wound, and he gets revived when he drinks something. So I thought, okay, maybe the whiskey is the holy grail or something, and he's getting revived. Also,
Yeah.
you mentioned that um, he dies because he sees his wife or daughter. I don't know who Guinevere is, having an affair or something with Lancelot. So I think
His wife. Yeah.
in Finnegan's Wake, there's also this mythology built in with the story of Tristan and Isolde and the original King Finn McCool, where it's about a woman being trapped between two men, an old guy who's the king and a new guy who's just coming up and who represents life. And there's a triad there. So I thought maybe Finnegan's Wake is also invoking some myths from the Arthurian legends in that way. I mean, of course there would be, but I thought I should bring it up since we're talking about rivers, and I thought, okay, river run. That's a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Tristan Isolde, I've not gone deep into this, but I think it's adjacent or somehow connected to Arthurian legend. This is just off Wikipedia. Um, it's a medieval chivalric romance told in numerous variations since the 12th century. Of disputed source, usually assumed to be primarily Celtic, the tale is a tragedy about the illicit love between the Cornish knight Tristan and the Irish princess Isolde or Isolt in the days of King Arthur. So I don't. I wonder if it's connected to Wagner and the Parsifal legend. I'll have to go deeper into that, but I'll make a note of that. And I yeah, I'll make a note of that. It's relevant. Okay. The only other thing here, just to maybe clarify a few things about the synonymous nature between Tammuz and Adonis. I don't know if I said this, but Tammuz, instead of Aphrodite, loves Ishtar. Definitely descends into the underworld. There's all the lamentation that's associated with it, the wasteland, and he too is restored via the water of life. I think the rest of this is repetitious, so we can go to the next slide if you like, Jordan. All right, so we have talked about this a little bit. We talked about I think when I brought these excerpts from these articles up before, what we're looking at here is an excerpt from the Esquire article, The Holy Family" by Gore Vidal. I believe it was written in 1968. I got to get my glasses on here, but where he talks about there being the mythology of Camelot. And it didn't really mean as much to me when I read this the first time, but he openly says, like, there is the Adonis myth here. Jordan, could you read that for us just to situate everyone, the one on top with the red arrow?
Yeah. With Lucifer now rampant upon the heights, the surviving Kennedys are again at work to regain the lost paradise, which means that books must be written not only about the new incarnation of the Kennedy godhead, but the old, for it is the dead hero's magic that makes legitimate the family's pretensions. As an Osiris Adonis Christ figure,
Yeah,
JFK is already the subject of a cult that may persist through the machinery of publicity long after all memory of his administration has been absorbed by the golden myth now being created in 1,000 books to the single end of maintaining in power our extraordinary holy family.
there you go. Thank you so much. So this is a very important article Gore Vidal was a distant cousin of JFK. I'm not some sort of expert on the relationship, but it seems to be kind of love hate, or that he was disappointed or something like that. But don't quote me on it. But it makes me. What's interesting about this is like Gore Vidal is a serious intellectual, right? Like Gore Vidal was someone who was on like firing line and was part of the liberal intelligentsia for a long time. And he is clearly very familiar with the Golden Bough. In fact, I did a little bit of research to see if the Golden Bough comes up in his other works. I think he has a book called Julian where he draws heavily on it. And so, this is 1968 and he's kind of like, "Hey, like there's something about JFK and the Golden Bough happening here." That if you read between the lines, that's what he's saying by saying about the Osiris Christ Adonis myth. This is before we have such nut jobs, right, as Downard and Hoffman saying the same thing and perhaps taking it to a fringe place that makes people pretty uncomfortable. And it makes me wonder if if Gore Vidal may have inspired, like if Downard read this and he was like, "Wait, that's it." I have no idea, but I'm curious. It makes me want to email Hoffman and see what he has to say about that. Now, what's interesting is that this idea gets recycled in the wake of the JFK Jr. death. And you can see in this Salon article from 1999 titled "The Strange Magic of JFK Jr.," where again, he is analogized. The Gore Vidal article from Esquire is cited, and then the Adonis label is applied to him. And that's there are people, serious intellectual people, who write very impactful essays for the best magazines, who are circling around this idea of archetypal manifestation through the Kennedy father and son. So I just want to point that out, that this is something that was percolating up long before the real crazies got a hold of it. Let's say that. Just interesting. And then, of course, there is Adonis and Venus. I think some birthday nexus stuff is going to come into play here. I'll talk about it briefly. I'll save that till we talk about the connections between Adonis and Apollo. But this, I think, if memory serves me correctly, this is where I started to like maybe apply the schema. Can you go to the next slide, Jordan? Yes. Okay. So what I did here was like, okay, if we can say that JFK is some sort of archetypal expression of Adonis, like what is the underlying Jungian archetype that is associated with this? And it seems to be something that Jung talked about called the puer aeternus, which I believe is the eternal youth archetype that would be underneath both the Adonis archetype and JFK, right? So then thinking about, okay, who's Persephone? Who's Aphrodite? And wouldn't you know, like we haven't really looked at it through Adonis, but I can't remember the weird associative logic that I used. But do you guys remember? I was like, oh, look, they're lunar figures, right? Marilyn's the full moon, all the lunar imagery associated with Marilyn, right? I whether she's reading the book Ulysses on the silvery beds, or no, she was reading How to Use Your Thinking Ability on the Silvery Bedspread, or her being Molly Bloom. I reasoned somehow that she's the moon and Marilyn was the dark moon. Well, it actually maps kind of perfectly, like Celine was talking about, in terms of the different moon goddesses, like the triple goddesses or whatever. You can talk about Jackie being the shadow of Persephone, the goddess of the underworld, and Marilyn being Aphrodite. Now, where does that put JFK Jr.? I think it's a different variation, perhaps a blend of this puer aeternus archetype of Jung. And it seems very clear to me that there's something going on with JFK Jr. and Icarus. He dies in his airplane, right? He flew too close to the sun. His wings melt. He crashes into the ocean, right? Now, what is so interesting, and I haven't had a chance to think about this, I think Ostick probably knows that JFK Jr. dies on July 16th, 1999. And this is important when we look at Eyes Wide Shut, the Lucky to Be Alive article in the New York Post, and how it's written by Larry Salona, the same guy who breaks the Epstein files or whatever else in the New York Post, and the Kubrick death. July 16th, 1999 is the 30th anniversary of the Apollo 11 launch. Okay. So we have the sun god and we have the Icarian figure. But what I did not realize, or maybe I had forgotten, I just realized JFK Jr. is born on November 25th. Well, why might that be interesting? When did JFK die, guys?
11/22.
And when was the funeral?
Oh, I
Well,
don't
you see where I'm
recall.
going with this. It was
Yes.
on 11/25. So
Yeah.
JFK Jr.'s third birthday was on his father's funeral.
Mm.
And from what I did a little research into it, I haven't gone deep into it, but apparently at the end of the day, they had a little private birthday party for John just to kind of maintain normalcy. And I think that is really significant that they celebrated the death of his father and his own life on the very same day.
You have a cycle like that. I have a
do have a
cycle like that.
Yeah. I sometimes wonder if that cycle was done intentionally, so I bring my attention to it. But
Yeah, and July is Cancer that month.
is it Cancer or is it
Moon.
Leo? I always associate July with Leo.
July's Cancer. So you said July 17th. Yeah.
16th.
16th. That's Cancer.
Okay. I'd have to check.
It's true.
Okay.
Also,
all right.
Cancer
Let's
is
go to the
6,
next
9,
somewhere.
Is it is July Cancer or Leo? Because
it's Cancer.
Cancer. It's 22nd July starts Leo.
Moon.
Oh yeah, you're right. Right. It's okay. Yeah, July 22nd is the cutoff for Cancer, and then because Kubrick is a Leo. That's right, and he's born. He's a July 26er. All right.
I see why you were. Yes.
Yeah. That's what I was like. No, Kubrick's a Leo.
You're like, I know.
July 26th. All right, let's go to the next one. And then I'll pause after this. If you can go to the next slide, Jordan. Okay, I gotta look. I gotta get my glasses on here. So just to add a layer to it, I think we've already, we've already kind of talked about. I've gone into a little bit of the deeper layers here about how Aphrodite is connected to the moon, how Adonis and Osiris are connected to the sun. I think I probably don't need to go deeper into it. It might eat up some time, but that's what is in this chart. If we want to go deeper into it, I think it's pretty obvious how they're connected to these things now. I have some stuff on Manly P. Hall saying essentially the same thing, but there is this basis, and I think Celine covered it well enough to talk about Aphrodite and Persephone in regards to these different phases of the moon. Yeah. So
do you guys remember the movie Barbie? Like in the beginning, they also had.
I remember it. Yeah.
I mean, Marilyn's like the ultimate Barbie back then.
Right. And it makes perfect sense. If JFK is Adonis, it makes perfect sense that he would be caught between two women, and a light woman and a dark woman. It maps so perfectly.
Twins.
It maps really, really well. I don't know.
It's like mind blown right now.
My voice is giving out, so someone else talk for a little bit.
Kubrick, on his last interview, that was him accepting the Lifetime Achievement Award. He mentioned this particular myth, the Icarus myth, and I thought that was relevant because his last movie was released on that particular day when that Icarus figure was maybe shot down from the sky or something. So, yeah, I just wanted to point that out. And also, since
Yeah.
we have brought up
W-
Inanna and Ishtar, we could bring in Icebird Shut, the star of Ishtar and everything. I mean, that's a well-trodden
You
path, but I thought
could.
there is
That's
that
yeah, that's
angle
a
as well.
great thing to bring back into it. And what Osik is talking about is he's talking about the first, only, and last acceptance speech that Kubrick ever did. He did for the D.W. Griffith Award, and he gives this very cryptic acceptance speech about getting out of the car, where he talks about what is the real moral lesson of the Icarus myth. So it's all like Osik saying, he releases it on JFK Jr.'s death day. He has allusions to it, or seemingly foreknowledge with the Larry Salona paper. JFK Jr. dies, and Kubrick dies on March 27th, right?
March 7th,
So
that's the
March 7th.
66th
That's
day. No,
yeah,
is it?
666th day before 2001.
Yeah, that's a lot of things, man.
Synchronicities.
You do not even want to bring that up. Also, March
Well,
7th
we'll
is
talk about it
also
more.
the 66th day of the year, I think, because February is 28, is 31, so you get 29 days, and 7 days later, March 7th, 66 days. So yeah, it's the 66th day of the year as well, March 7th.
It's crazy.
Mm.
What do you think, Jordan?
I mean, we've gone into this quite a bit in previous episodes, so I feel like we've covered it a lot. Uh,
Anything
It
new
feels
jump at it? Yeah.
we haven't gotten yet into JFK Jr. being the reflected light, so that's interesting. Also, though, yeah, Celine, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I feel like Inanna is such a deep like root system, but she could be the force that insists
Mm,
is moving through all of them consciously, and like her descent is voluntary, so that
yeah.
threshold into the death while still alive, carrying her power and desire, and so
Well, could you elaborate on Anana descending consciously? I don't know as not enough about Anana. What do you know about Anana?
it's like the dark feminine descending into the void for her to like emerge again and reclaim the throne, I guess you could say it. But yeah, there's so much like complicated mythologies around her.
Yeah. We'll go deeper into it. All right. What do we got next here? Oh, this is going to set up my Gilmore Girls synchronicity. Okay. So I was just like, okay, like it's so obvious that Marilyn is Aphrodite or Venus. Oh, wouldn't you know? Oh, wouldn't you know? She actually did 2 photo shoots as Venus and Aphrodite. I believe this one on the left is called Aphrodite on the Beach. I think it was done by a photographer named Sam Shaw. So, and I imagine it's this statue is something that was an inspiration. And then very directly, one of the last photo shoots she did was the one on the right here, where it's modeled after Botticelli's The Birth of Venus. And and it's done by Eve Arnold. And I was like, oh, I don't know if you guys remember Eve Arnold. Eve Arnold is the woman who apparently she did a whole series of photo shoots uh with with Marilyn, but she's the one that took the photo of Marilyn performatively reading the last chapter of Ulysses
Ooh.
on the playground. And that's going to be important for the next slide.
We're making a lot of good connections here.
Right. So I figured this out. And my ritual is to watch Gilmore Girls before bed. Did you ever watch Gilmore Girls, Celine?
No. Well, I think
Oh,
I'd seen a few, but not a lot.
So I've just been
Luke
having
is
my
very invested.
I'm having my life like reflected back into it. And so I
Oh, wow.
fired up and like within like 5 minutes, there's a Venus Williams joke. There's the grandmother and the best friend's mom haggle over uh they haggle over um antique furniture prices, and one of the girls says it's like watching the Williams sisters. Well, one of the Williams sisters is named Venus, and I was like, no. And I was like, okay, maybe that's not that strong. And then the opening scene of the next episode is Rory reading Ulysses by James Joyce, which is clearly a reference to Marilyn reading Ulysses at the playground, which was shot by Eve Arnold, who shot The Birth of Venus, Marilyn Monroe shoot. And honest to God, I watched this an hour before turning this on. And it really raises an interesting question. It's like, and I hate to say this because it makes me sound so insane. Did that happen before I looked at these things? And of course, that temporally is like, of course it did, Luke. Who do you think you are? But it's
Desire,
I don't know.
right?
Yeah. What do you think, Ostic? Ostic's like, whatever, dude. Stop talking about Gilmore Girls. It's a good show.
I don't mind.
I think it's more for a male audience than I had ever realized.
Ironically, I've never met a male who's ever seen Gilmore Girls.
I think there's a lot there for them.
I'll check it out. Maybe I see my life reflected in it too.
It's not intentionally esoteric, but it's becoming so for me. It's bizarre.
It's because
Well, they were influenced by Twin Peaks, which
we know that now, and it makes perfect sense because I spiraled about it. We know that now. When we first started watching it, I was like, oh, this is like a light version of Twin Peaks, and then it became obvious that which almost makes it more uncanny in a way. Like it's
like a weird Twin Peaks Truman Show hybrid.
It's getting
and
it's Truman Showy.
Increasingly Truman Showy.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's obvious falseness is easier to detect than I wouldn't say that Twin Peaks is obviously false, but like Gilmore Girls is like obviously very orchestrated, like on a movie set. And but it's not acknowledging the movie set.
Right.
I'll have to watch it tonight.
It's not that deep, but it's becoming deep. It's a weird phenomenon. I mean, when we were watching The Good Place, now that one is kind of intentionally deep and kind of has a similar vibe. When Jordan had an astute insight when we were watching it. She's like, it's like a pharmaceutical ad. It's like a show that's happening. You know how like pharmaceutical ads like are very fake, like they're like fake. It's like stock footage and like very fake performances. Like it's kind of like The Good Place is happening within a pharmaceutical ad.
Super bright, like everybody's like.
Yeah.
The color palettes, the music, to me, it feels like an artificial little perfect utopia, but underneath it are all these cracks, which I would say is true of a medication commercial.
Yeah.
And then they list all the side effects.
Side effects so long.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you guys need a break, or do you want to go into the next Golden Bough section?
I think this would be a good
maybe
stopping point before transitioning.
5.
Yeah, unless anyone has any closing remarks on what we've covered.
We could keep going the rabbit hole.
All right. I'll pause it.
We'll pause for a second. Dealey Plaza. So keep that in mind as I read this. The cult of Adonis shows that geography and seasonal cycles were active participants in divine drama. Rivers reddened, flowers bloomed and died, vegetation withered and returned, and the land itself enacted the god's death and renewal independently of human ritual. Anchored in Byblos, Syria, and Paphos, Cyprus, and overseen by King Sinrus. The cult fused sacred topography, seasonal observation, and mythic narrative into one system. Gorges, waterfalls, and river valleys function as ritual architecture where Adonis was believed, wounded, killed, and reborn annually, his blood staining the river and anemones blooming in his wake. Myth was not invention, but recognition. The landscape repeating its cycles provided the template for death, fertility, kingship, and divine power. Human rituals followed nature's pattern. This system locates divinity within the land, converting mortality into continuity, sanctifying seasonal change, and establishing a model for civilizations where myth emerges from observing nature rather than imposing story. In the Adonis system, the dying god and the sacred king are distinct but fused roles. Adonis is the mythic image of vegetation itself, the life force that blooms, withers, dies, and returns. The sacred king is the human vessel through which that same power is made socially operative. As communities became less directly tied to the fields, renewal required a visible guarantor. So fertility and seasonal order were placed in a ruler's body. The king did not symbolize the land, he embodied it. Through sacred marriage, ritual renewal, wounding, humiliation, or replacement, he temporarily became Adonis in human form, bearing the god's fate on behalf of the world. Adonis is the pattern, the king is the living instantiation. Together they bind myth, nature, and authority into a single mechanism designed to secure continuity when life itself appears to fail. Okay, so the thing that I wanted to think about with this, and I've gone on record here saying that I understand why individuals want to say that the Golden Bough and the killing of the king ritual is happening with the Kennedy assassination. And one piece of evidence that I think one could latch onto and say, look, this is a scripted ritual, is just how much the death and resurrection of Adonis and the Adonis king figure is tied to the topography of the landscape. Okay. Something we have done when we have looked at Dealey Plaza, specifically when we looked at the trident of the three roads that are there, and we've connected that to Poseidon and also the cross, it being done at high noon. What are some of the other things that we've looked at? Perhaps its connection to the Trinity River, although I haven't talked about it too much. But people have done the fact that he gets killed on Elm Street, right? This is something that Downer points out, the fact that elms are considered to be associated with the underworld. It does that idea doesn't seem so crazy. When I was thinking about that idea before, it was like this archetype or these archetypal things like bleeding through into reality, and maybe that's in fact the case. But at least in the instance of Adonis, there's a long established history for the worship and the death and the resurrection of a king figure to be intimately connected to the land and certain landmarks. And I think that gives juice to the idea. I still am hesitant to say that that's exactly what's going on here. It seems like this is like a layer that people kind of get arrested at and say, oh, look, there is this temple that Dealey Plaza was converted into a temple complex and this ritual happened, et cetera, et cetera. But when I think about all the different orchestrations and the fact that there's so many things that don't fit, and I feel like there's a lot of times I'm squinting my eyes to make the things fit, it makes me think that that's not the ultimate explanation for what we're witnessing what we're witnessing here. And that is probably something that is being assumed and ascribed to the events rather than what is happening. And I think people are stalling out with this interpretation, but I could be convincing myself out of something obvious. So I'll pause there for a second and let you guys weigh in.
I also feel like Kennedy was playing the King Arthur archetype,
Mhm.
and he has his Knights of Round Table, and he was basically trying to bring the silver dollar, and they don't like messing with their money, fiat, these bank cartels.
Right.
Just like what happened in Lincoln when he tried to bring his greenbacks. And yeah, there's like so much involvement with the whole kingdom.
Well, that was one of the things that I looked into. I think I have a slide on this, but I was trying to think like who, if it is a ritual site, um, who is carrying out this ritual? Like who like really in the world today is still believing these things, right? And maybe we want to jump ahead uh to this. I'm trying to think where I put this slide. Um I don't know, but we'll get to it when we get to it. It I think it might be the next two slides, but
Mhm.
the idea, this stuff was going on like 3,000 years ago. And when you look at history, when you look at the Roman conquest of all these different places and the Christianizing
Mhm.
events that happen, um, I think these next slides, ultimately these places where these religious practices were going on ultimately get assimilated, and the types of monarchies and things like that that come up are not necessarily connected to these sacred Adonis rituals and these different bloodlines that proceed through the queen, because there's all this temple prostitution and incest that goes on as with the avatar that is of Aphrodite. There seem to be larger forces at work here that have cut off the connection to these nature worship religions that are no longer really operative today.
Mhm.
So I'm not really, so it's like if it is still in effect, it seems like it's kind of unconsciously, like I don't know if we did this enough
Yeah.
and it kind of became something like a blood memory that the mind is, and so
I
it just can't help but manifest itself.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of these mythologies, right, it gets recorded into our collective pain body. And so it gets collected into the landmass and within our own pain bodies. So these myths just keep replaying. I think it's the system just organizing itself that we can't help but see these symbols because of how patterning works.
That's a really interesting idea that you bring up, the pain body. And because I've talked about it in terms of just like the mind of individuals or the collective unconscious, but
Mhm.
the idea that it might actually get soaked into the land itself. That's
I mean, the first
that's an interesting
trauma
idea.
Yeah, the first trauma was from the Trojan War, from, these like the Odyssey. And ever since then, it's been recorded in kind of the Akashic of the earth and just replays until we observe it and collapse that wave function.
That is an interesting idea. Ostic, I think you want to say something.
Yeah, I agree with this idea about people, speculating about where this thing happened, and there's a layering about okay, it's the Elm Street, so the elm tree is from the underworld. So that
Mm.
that is a that is good information, and I agree with
It's
that, and
also
I
like
think
karma and samsara. Um, you know.
yeah. The other thing I wanted to point out, just as an aside, that since we're talking about the Red Rivers and there was a visual about a Red River, and then we were talking about The Shining. So it was given that Adonis is meant to represent, he's being born somewhere, is a symbol of life and death. So what happens during life? So when we enter life, sometimes there is a river of blood before that, or
Mm.
life, when we anticipate life, ladies. So yeah, so that what happens. Oh, I thought maybe that could also play into it, that menstrual blood could be, being seen as Red River or something. And then I thought about him being wounded at the mountain. Then I thought about The Shining. What happens before they go to the mountain? Because the hotel is at the mountain, and Jack drives towards it with his family. So Danny gets a vision of a red river before
That's
in the
right.
bathroom. So
Yeah.
this means I mean, is it like the sign that Adonis has been wounded, so you can get into it, and there will be a new birth there? So you know you have to move to the mountain to get to it, and
Yeah.
so that is what I was
It's
thinking
a
about.
masculine wound too, like the innocence of the masculine into manhood.
I think the
Yeah,
I think I think this Adonis interpretation of The Shining is going to work well, especially when we look at the connections between Adonis and Apollo, because clearly Apollo, a lot of people interpret The Shining as like this confession that Kubrick filmed the moon landing because of the scene where Danny rises up and walks towards the forbidden room while wearing the Apollo sweater, right? But I think that Apollo sweater, when we look at it, let's think about that. But I really think Osik is onto something with this Adonis interpretation of The Shining, and I want to think about how it could connect to Apollo. Not to mention JFK, because JFK is in The Shining too, via Barry Nelson as Ullman, right?
yeah. I mean, that movie is full of. I mean, we started off this episode talking about these books that we do not read. I mean, even Wendy could be thought of as a performative reader. I mean, I'm not
She
saying she's a
definitely
performative
is.
reader, but like she's surrounded by so many books. Like it's just like insane amount of books, and each of these books they talk about very very pioneering endeavors. So when she talks to the doctor, there's a book around her that is the autobiography of Tenzing Norgay, the guy who summited Mount Everest for the first time. So again, there's a mountain myth, and we
Yes.
also know The Shining is connected with Abbey Road, and Abbey Road was supposed to be named Everest. So there's that connection to it as well. So there, that that line of thinking could be applied to Wendy as well, that she is a reader and she reads too much and she loves horror books.
Oh yeah, she's a certified horror fanatic or something like that. He says that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've said this, or I don't know if I've said this personally or in one of these things. I really think Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain is very relevant to The Shining. I see a lot of similarities between those books, but like you're saying, in the Torrance apartment, there's just stacks and stacks of books, and I've done this thing where I've tried to like freeze the frames and look at all the different stacks of books because I know that Kubrick, if he's putting books in a thing, is like trying to tell you something, right? Like he and there I've just come as much as I love the Kubrick stuff, there's just too many little Easter eggs for me to chase. I need to get to this
Yeah.
broader theory that I've been working on. I think in those scenes there's a lot of like sociology and psychology books, if memory serves me correctly.
I
Yeah,
like that
different
you
kind of
guys
books.
mentioned sorry. Yeah, I
What were you
like that you
saying?
guys mentioned about the mountain also. It reminds me of Mount Zion, right? The hill in Jerusalem and the city of David, basically the symbol of God's dwelling. And King David,
There's like, yeah, mountains are always
the ark.
associated. Yeah, mountains are always associated where like mortals and immortals meet, right?
Even the Torrance family, they are from Vermont. What is Vermont? The Truth Mountain. I mean, Veritas
Are
and
they from
all.
Vermont or
Yeah.
are they from
He
Vermont or are
said
they from
Mm,
Colorado?
Wendy tells the doctor that she's from Vermont.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
so that's that. And also there was a hippie cult in the 1880s that was also called some sort it had that veritas in that, and it was supposedly on a mountain where they were doing this free love thing. So yeah, I thought that was also connected with the Shining or something. I picked up a lot of references over the years.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think it's really productive in understanding that movie. Jordan, do you want to say something before we progress?
I do. It's a bit of a detour, but it's going back to you were talking about geography of Dealey Plaza,
Mhm.
and Celine, you talked about the Akashic record,
Mhm.
but also we have the legal record, which
Mm.
Yeah.
is a big
Oh.
layer of this simulation. In Dealey Plaza, it's where the primary courthouse is. It's where I went to go register my vehicle.
My god.
um, so to the right off of this map is where the monument is, the big box.
Mm.
There's a lot of Dallas specific history that's commemorated here beyond just JFK, but focusing just on JFK. We have the Records Building. They cross over Record Street. We have Commerce, Main, and Elm. So they take a bit of a detour to go into the underworld
Mm.
through Elm.
Mm.
They go under this underpass with the
No, that's
railroad.
interesting. That's
Rail cars
interesting.
are very symbolic. Transportation in general is very symbolic. We could spiral about that. And they emerge in this consolidated stream that brings both the commercial world, the commerce world, and Elm, the spiritual metaphysical underworld. And Main Street almost to me feels more just like the plain, right? Main Street is like the primary
Physical.
road of just,
Yeah,
yeah,
I like
just 3D experience.
it's like the layers of reality, like
Correct.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I
And the
like that.
shooter on top of the building.
Yeah.
Correct. And the fact that it's the book depository, I
Yeah.
think there's a lot going on here with creating history,
Yeah.
creating a historical record, what's going to go into the school books. Um,
Yeah, and I
yeah,
feel like his assassination was also kind of a big, like, pillar moment within American histories, like, in their traumatic experience within the American society.
yeah.
So that gets recorded.
Yeah, Jordan, that's great. I hadn't even thought about going under the bypass or under that triple bypass, like it's going into the underworld. And the train, we see this all the time. The train is a big. I should look into the train symbolism. I'll make a note of it. A
A
lot
friend
of
of
the
mine too told me he views Dallas as the energetic heart of America.
Mm.
If you look at a lot of distribution pathways, obviously Texas is not in the middle of the United States, but for example, with the music record industry, a lot of what got distributed throughout the US went through Dallas specifically. It's this
Mm.
very interesting hub. You also had the show Dallas that was on air, I think, before this event. So there was just a lot of consciousness projected at Dallas specifically. And then Celine, if you ever visit, let me know because there's a lot of, I would say, nefarious gridding
Mhm.
that goes on in
Mhm.
Dallas that's fascinating. So there's just kind of this energetic siphoning to and then amplification. And in this example, I think a perversion of just conscious energy being manipulated into it, but it's not all bad, but I think that this merging of the commercial world and the world of the dead is something I'm very fascinated with.
I think it's a great observation. I just to add something to the train. The trains are very important when we look at these shows that are like alchemical and disclosure driven. In Westworld, right? When we're kind of introduced to like a fabricated reality, the guests go in and out via a train, and isn't the same in the Good Place? Don't they arrive there via train?
The train is how they move, I think, between their perception of what is hell and what is heaven
Yeah,
shifts,
yeah, yeah.
but
Mm.
moving between those realms of purgatory, they get on a train to go to the I forget what they call it, but the okay place.
Yeah, yeah.
The movie Wicked had a train scene too where Ariana went to the Emerald City and she was like saying goodbye and Alphaba. It's really interesting to see the wizard.
Yeah. I think there's something really to that. And just to add something to the whole the shooting supposedly taking place from the Texas School Book Depository. I mean, though it is not the case now, the Golden Bough was, I think, at one point, very much a part of curriculum. So in a
Mm.
way, if the Golden Bough is our decoder ring for this, you could say that this is pointing back at one of the school, or there's like a larger message here about, look, go back to your school books, go back to learning. You need to learn what you're looking at. I think there's some sort of message here, but the fact that the shot takes place from the school book depository.
And that's where all of the memories are housed now. That's where the sixth floor museum is. It's
Yeah.
where they take us, all the school children, to re-traumatize us and make sure we don't forget
Oh.
what happens in our town. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, I have family personal connections to all of it as well. That kind of continues to re-solidify that. But yeah, I mean, and the Holocaust Museum is very nearby as well. It's in
Wow.
the same part of the city.
It's all connected.
It is all
Mhm.
connected. It is. Osik
Mhm.
looks like he has something to say.
No.
You good?
I was just wondering if it looks like the birth canal or something. I was thinking about that. I mean, they're like
It kind
fallopian
of
tubes.
does.
Mhm.
You could almost see the pathway to, like, the ovaries. It almost
Yeah,
looks like that to me.
it's like
Yeah.
The bleeding of the collective unconscious.
Yeah. Yeah. Great stuff, guys. Great stuff. Okay. What do we have up next? We're talking about, we talking about T.S. Eliot a little bit now.
Ooh.
Okay. So this was just a discovery. I thinking about all this killing of the king ritual and barrenness, um, got me thinking about obviously T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland again. And we have talked about, one of the things I said in the very first episode that we did is that the import of the Golden Bough should be obvious to anyone that has seen Apocalypse Now. And it is coupled with Weston's From Ritual to Romance in Apocalypse Now. There you can see them stacked on top of one another. And I got to thinking about this when I was thinking about T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. Well, what two books inspire The Wasteland? Well, it's The Golden Bough and Weston's From Ritual to Romance. So in a way, Apocalypse Now, though it does not quote T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, it is a visual expression of T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. And the two books themselves are kind of a nod together. The fact that they're together, and then you extrapolate that out to the war scenario that we see in this fake Vietnam movie. I think that's really interesting. Not to mention, and I think that was not lost on Coppola, because although The Wasteland is not quoted in Apocalypse Now, several other T.S. Eliot poems are, specifically The Hollow Men and the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. And there are several other references, direct or indirect, to T.S. Eliot. But I think, thinking deeper about this, I think that might have been part of what Coppola was referencing by putting those two books together. You kind of have to know the third secret thing that arises from these two books being stacked together is T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. And now I'm going to bring that to the moon, which is kind of in a way the ultimate wasteland. So I'm sure Osik has something to say about this. Or did I catch you off guard? What do you think? Do you find this interesting, Osik? I mean, even if it's just that.
of course I do. I mean, of course.
Did you
But again,
know that T.S. Eliot was in Apocalypse Now? I had forgotten.
yes, I knew it. But again, I don't have the literary pedigree to quote it or claim to understand it. I have not read it. But I think some more learned people could shine light on this
Well, what I
along.
want to do, I want what I want to do is I want us to get through the Adonis material and the Osiris material, and then I want us to have one episode where we sit down with Bays Lit and we go through the Wasteland
Oh
and
yeah, based lit,
apply.
he does that.
Yes, so I want I want us to sit down with Bays Lit and talk about Weston and the Golden Bough and everything that we've covered in regards to T.S. Eliot. So I think we'll do like a super episode on that if I can convince him to do it.
Yeah, he does a good Marlon Brando impression from
Yeah.
the Apocalypse.
He's a
Hello,
man of 1,000
Lord,
voices.
Lord. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Ladies, do you have anything to say about T.S. Eliot here?
Oh, I like the Merlin reference.
Yeah.
Mm, see.
Well, we can go on to the moon. I want to apply this to the moon.
Yeah, we don't have to know everything. It's just
Yeah, we don't.
a signboard. We'll get to it eventually in the future episodes.
Yeah.
You don't have
Yeah,
to
Oh, yes, it
be
will come
on
back
your
around.
we
toes.
will. Okay.
It's just an
All right. I
introduction.
guess I don't have. We'll come back around to it to the moon. I've got these a little out of order. All right. So I'm just going to read this little paragraph. The Adonis Aphrodite cult in Cyprus was a fully integrated survival system linking land, fertility, kingship, music, and divinity. The goddess embodied reproductive power, while Adonis, her mortal divine lover, ensured renewal of crops, animals, and people through his annual union and death. Sacred prostitution, royal incest myths, divine kingship, and ecstatic ritual were functional, not aberrant. Paphos, the cult's center, anchored this system in its geography and in a sacred conical stone, which we'll talk about here, representing the goddess herself and linking local practice to broader Near Eastern traditions. Kings like Cinyras embodied Adonis, acting as divine lovers and guarantors of fertility, while music induced ecstasy and mediated between human and divine. Myths and rituals recorded not scandal, but survival logic. The land, god, king, and sound were instruments in one life-sustaining mechanism, with the conical stone serving as the material focus of divine presence. Yeah, so this is the conical stone of the
Mm.
sanctuary, and here are some of the waterfalls that are associated with the site as well. It reading having read the Bible closely, it's interesting to like what were these temple prostitutes and things like that, and it definitely fills in a lot of the gaps trying to understand what the writers of the Bible were responding to. And it's I mean, Frazer is pretty good with the details, and it gets pretty I don't want to say graphic, but I mean, you can kind of sense the whole ecosystem that was involved here, and you kind of understand why some of the the fundamentalist Christians were like, yeah, we're not doing this anymore. Like, this is insanity. It would look like insanity to us for not being indoctrinated into this culture. One of the things I thought was interesting about this conical stone that is supposed to represent Aphrodite, in certain, Frazer says in this offhand remark, he says that sometimes the conical stones are associated with Artemis as well. And I found that interesting, given that the Orion capsule is conical in shape. And I want, is it just the fact that something conical is associated with Artemis was, and by extension Aphrodite, and was interesting to me. But yeah, we have these divine kings and these temple prostitutes that are earthly representatives of these entities that are uh, in need of help and replenishment in order to complete the cycles of reality. So it raises interesting questions. If Kennedy and Monroe and Jackie and all these individuals are somehow like the temporal manifestations of these larger gods or archetypes that are operating behind the scenes, what that even means. I don't know how I can get it. I don't know if I can make it. It's too messy. There's enough there to see the analogy, but it's not strong enough where I think it's like an open and shut case. To me, it's like, it just seems like a higher reality like bleeds through. And
I think it
it's
circles back to Jung also, like the
yeah, of
Heros
course,
Gatos, the union of polarity.
for sure. For sure. I liked what Frazer had to say about music at the end of this chapter, and how he was quoting Cardinal Newman, and I think I did a lot of my life was devoted to music. And I think about this, that it was well understood amongst these people, and even like 100 years ago, that music is not just this like arrangement of sounds, that it is metaphysical in nature, and it is about connecting to these primal deities, to angels, to God. Like the real point of music is
Mhm.
to tap into higher realities. And that is an interesting thought to take into consideration when we think about secular music and perhaps how it is weaponized via MK Ultra or whatever else. Like what I think about this as someone who was obsessed with music, thought about music constantly. I was not thinking about this stuff at all.
Mhm.
Like I was not interested because my mind was preoccupied with music that may have been putting me in contact with something that I wasn't even aware of.
Yeah, I mean,
And
we're in a harmonic universe, right? So even Kubrick has the Zarathustra
yes, he does.
music, the Rainbow Bridge. So
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
The Rainbow Bridge. What is that?
Oh, from 2001, going through when Bowman with the all the voices, and he's going through having like the psychedelic experience where he's being
Okay.
transformed by the monolith.
I thought that was Lux Eterna. Is it okay?
I
Kinda
think
Ricky.
she's just pointing out the
Okay.
importance of the music in these scenes
mhm.
and how we could possibly extrapolate from that if music
Right.
is a religious technology and not just music.
I
George
think
Harrison came to
consciousness.
believe the same thing.
Yeah, what did George Harrison say?
I mean, when he came into contact with Indian musicians, he realized that all his life was playing for money or something or imitation. Then he became very snobby later on, but at the time when he learned it, he thought that okay, now music could be used to connect to the divine being because he learned it from the Indian classical musicians. So he was inspired, but he got that idea from there, and then he followed through on that. So that is interesting. I mean, it takes discipline, and it's that.
Well, what's
Uh,
ironic about that, and I know, and look, I love the Beatles. You know, I love the Beatles, but the many people claim that the Beatles were recruited specifically to do this sort of thing, is to essentially Psy war, like that they were like a chess piece in a Psy war.
yeah, people talk about that. Maybe when they were
I talk about it sometimes. I love the Beatles. Tomorrow Never Knows feels like it was written in 2007, not 1967.
yeah,
I
they
love them.
were good people. I mean, they were rich. They were in the news, so it's always there when someone is influential. Different kind of groups try to, contact them and try to spread their own influence through them. They're trying to capture some of their aura. So if you become like a very big podcaster, or if Jordan or Celine becomes a celebrity, all sorts of people would start to come in and say strange things here.
Oh
Maybe
yeah, I've got
even
my
say Nazi
Illuminati
things.
symbol. I've got my
Yeah,
Illuminati symbolism today.
yeah. So it's
They'll say
people
I was
try
part of the
to,
club.
yeah, people try to smuggle in things when people get big. It's the same thing that happened with Joe Rogan. He now he only gets money from all these very strange people, strange technocrats, strange tech bros. He brings on and they spread their weird ideas to unsuspecting dude bros all around the world. So it's that he has been infiltrated by all these people, and since it's no longer organic now, and that happens with people. So I think I'm not saying that that would could not happen with the Beatles. I mean, of course there are parasites all around them, people looking at them, okay, they're going, maybe we could spread our ideas. That's how all these ideas about, Celine talked about the Akashic records. How did it come there? It happened through writings about the people. They infiltrated all these influential circles, the influential book publishing houses, the Blavatsky lady, and in India, this J.D. Krishnamurti. He was the guy who was supposed to be the successor to Blavatsky. So it's and we don't really see that him presented as that, because we see him as like a very regular philosopher, but he's supposed to be the successor to the theosophy um, guy. And even in Indian independence movement, there were so many theosophists in very prominent positions. So there's a strange occurrence happens. I mean, if you occupy certain positions of influence within a society, then you can,
Mm.
smuggle in your ideas through maybe books, through music, through influential people. You bring them on TV, they can spread their ideas, and suddenly something emerges. You open schools, institutions, things like that. So I mean, that's the thing that turned Beatles off from that guy, that Maharishi, Mahesh Yogi. They thought that he's trying to use them as a vehicle for his own, influence to grow all around the world. They realized that, and then they distanced themselves from him. I mean, John did, Paul did, George did not. George thought that meditation itself is good. We should do it.
Mm.
Should not abandon. We should not throw the baby with the bath water. So there's this element always going on. So influential people, they always get, you will see them shaking hands with Jimmy Savile, and you say, "Oh, these guys, they're in with Jimmy Savile. They knew about him." I mean, no, Jimmy Savile, he was a predator. He seeked these people, and he was, he made it sure that he met them and tried to spread his, you know, this is like stealing aura from prominent people. This is just aura theft. All of this.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Not everybody
Beatles,
who
what
yeah.
war was it? What's happening? Was it Vietnam? What was it that they got famous? And then remember Yoko Ono and John Lennon were in the bed and
Yeah.
they were protesting, spreading love, I guess. What war was it happening
Vietnam
then?
War.
Yeah, yeah.
Vietnam War,
So
Vietnam War.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to apply a little
Just
bit of this. Oh, sure,
one
sure, sure.
small
Go
thing,
ahead.
one small thing. I mean, you talked about this temple prostitution thing. I thought, like, what are the sources for this? I mean, sometimes I see a lot of these things that are being said by Christians. I mean, for even Indians, they said this. So I was very skeptical of this idea that this might actually be happening there. Because British missionaries, they wrote about India and they said, oh, there's temple prostitution happening, and then there were no sources for it. People did not find anything. So this could
Oh,
also
my
be, I'm
my
not saying,
my source for it was just Fraser. I didn't go deeper
yeah,
into it than Fraser, but I mean, I can look into it. I mean, and even if it is
I'll look
happening,
into it.
even if it is happening, you know, the way that he talks about it in the Golden Bough is it's not like this uh debauchery, right? It's not like this like, oh, we're just having like this crazy orgy all the time. It's not like Caligula stuff. The way it was just like for them, it was a normal sort of thing where every woman had to participate in this to a certain degree, and it was kind of understood to be a communal responsibility. Um, it wasn't seen as this lecherous thing that was incompatible with their duties to natural marriage or something like that. It gets perhaps a bad reputation if you have consciously or unconsciously absorbed Christian teaching. And then we can argue about whether or not Christian or teaching is wrong or right, and whether or not that should have happened. But of course, the British Empire was infused with a Christian worldview and was going to make certain judgments in their writings about these areas and not be as sympathetic. But I think Fraser is sympathetic, or is because he's not exactly a Christian guy himself. Ultimately, I think he sees that his research is ultimately going to be a critique of Christendom. Not that I'm in
Yeah, I
favor of that
understand that.
either.
He's also not a primary source.
What's that?
So Fraser is not a primary
Right.
source. He's interpreting other sources. So, take it
Yeah,
or
I'm
leave
not,
it in terms
yeah,
of the
yeah.
details. And yeah,
I'm
that's
just
what I
thinking
would say
about,
there.
like, he might have been misinformed, because people have vested interests, the history writers, to, you know, malign the other religions, to be, morally
Sure.
inferior or something. Yeah. So that is
There's a
why I
lot of
was
critiques
skeptical.
of the Golden Bough because of the sources that he's drawing upon, and he's not interacting with these people personally. And he also the biggest critique we talked about from I can't let's see if I can say it Wittgenstein
Wittgenstein.
is that
Wittgenstein.
he is essentially presuming the
Yeah.
intentions of the observations, and the intentions are not necessarily even documented in the literature that he is reading and basing his work on. He's sort of hypothesizing what is in the mind and what the beliefs really mean or how people feel about it. What level of real do they view it as, right? There's many things we do today that people don't think is real, but like people don't think Santa's real, but they do it. And so, yeah, there's clearly limitations with that. And I think ultimately you have to tune in to what truth can you stream
Mhm.
and engage with. And I would also say, as consciousness has shifted on the planet, like different things that today may not be as quote acceptable or perhaps in alignment with the highest light, it shifts as like consciousness expands, and we're necessarily even beyond just the British Empire aspect of it. We're kind of just because of our situation being in bodies, we're kind of projecting onto different points in space time, like what's going on now, and viewing it through our lens, which is always going to be
Yeah.
limiting. But you're totally right. Like history is very selective and what gets recorded and what doesn't. A big place we see that is with the Gnostics, right? If you murder most of the people who disagree with you, you're gonna wind up with a very specific version of Christianity, even than what was necessarily practiced
Mhm.
by more and more people or understood by more and more people before an ethnic cleansing. So,
Yeah.
I
yeah.
think I wouldn't be surprised,
Important.
Osik, that some individuals. I mean, there's a reason why Frazer isn't taught anymore, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of the critiques is that he's over generalistic when it comes to the whole temple prostitution thing. So
Yeah, he's not taught anymore in anthropology schools at large, except as an example of antiquated anthropology. Our interest in the Golden Bough is more because these symbolic fractals are playing out, and it doesn't have to be true, candidly, for it to still be incredibly influential on all of the media that you both are obsessed with, and to see it play out and regurgitate. Whether or not it's factually correct, I don't
Mhm.
think is really even vital for the type of analysis we're
yeah, I'm not prepared to throw the baby out with the bathwater
well,
with
is
that.
King Arthur real?
Yeah.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. All right. We got
We're getting I'm just trying to say, like, it's a
yeah.
bigger metaphysical puzzle, and I don't think getting overly fixated on
I think you're right.
Yeah.
historical accuracy is necessary.
All right. I
It
agree.
makes me think
Okay, you're
of
done. We
the
gotta
No,
go.
no, it's not that. It's just
uh,
that we have 20 minutes to
We
get
are
through
almost the time.
we 20 minutes to get through 9 slides. So
Yeah.
we'll probably speed run a little bit here. Okay. 6:52 if we can.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry.
No, you're great. It's just it's a good thing to have vigorous conversation. So just something I did, I playing around with chat, I was just like, let's map the movements of the Adonis ritual onto Kennedy and whatnot. And two of the things that were interesting to me with the Adonis figure and Kennedy, something I've not really emphasized enough is the Cold War in my archetypal psychohistory in regards to how much of that nuclear brinkmanship might have been corresponding to the fears that that spring would not renew the land. I find that
mm,
interesting, even thinking about like concepts like nuclear winter. So it's um, for future slides and things like that. I might want to explore that a little bit more. The other thing too, and perhaps we've talked about it in regards to Adonis descending into the underworld, um, and the Apollo missions going into outer space. I don't think we've really talked about outer space as being analogous to the underworld. And since the Apollo mission is an extension of JFK and his dream, in a sense, you could argue that he has gone to outer space and is returning via his surrogates. So I thought that was kind of an interesting suggestion that it came up with. I'll pause there and we can talk about it, or we'll keep going.
Didn't you post like a photo of the Oppenheimer?
Yeah, well, I've argued that that there's like and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more, but there seems to be something about nuclear weapons and going to the moon that are connected to vegetation. There's all sorts of vegetation that's wrapped up in nuclear weapons. I mean, just most obviously the mushroom cloud, right? And that being this is comparing annihilation to an edible plant that, and you could talk about it. Some people even think about, I want to explore this. Some people like, this is like the stoned ape theory or whatever, that like mushrooms are like responsible for the evolution of consciousness. So I think that's worth exploring at some point. They're like the true forbidden fruit. So I think that's worth exploring. But we'll pick that up. What do I want to, something I wanted to add a layer of understanding. If we go to 653, about how Adonis dies. Okay, when we looked at via our analysis of Artemis Orion, my concerns about the Orion capsule, which, to be honest, seem vindicated. Maybe they'll solve it. Maybe they will solve the charring of the heat shield on the Orion capsule. But right now, I feel pretty good about that prediction and the delayed timeline. But something similar happened with Apollo and Adonis. There is this story where Aphrodite, there's a story that one of Apollo's sons, Erymanthus, either caught Aphrodite bathing or bathing with Adonis. And Aphrodite responded by blinding Apollo's son, Erymanthus. So for retribution for this, Apollo transforms into a wild boar and gores Adonis' death. This comes from Ptolemy Chenes from the 1st, 2nd century CE and was preserved by Photius. So this is one of those outside the typical canon sources, from what I understand. So you think about this, when if JFK is this Adonis figure and we have the Apollo missions, it would in a sense make sense that his death is kind of woven into the Apollo Adonis narrative. Now there's another way that Apollo and Adonis are connected, and that's because they are lovers. Adonis is listed as one of Apollo's male lovers. He is described as androgynous, acting as a traditional man with Aphrodite and taking a receptive role with Apollo. And I'm not trying to get crude here or anything. This comes from Scholia on Theocritus, and it's referenced in late antiquity summaries. So if we could look at it from another angle, where Adonis is in love with Apollo, and if the mission that outlives Adonis is Apollo, you could kind of see in some ways archetypally how these two are lovers. I found that interesting. I think in that kind of makes, in some ways, I think this association between Adonis and Apollo makes it a little bit stronger in ways that I haven't heard anyone else talk about. And I don't know if there's anything else I want to share here, but in Artemis kills Adonis because she disapproves of her brother's affair with a mortal man, or to punish Aphrodite for a separate slight. So there's also this situation where, like, when you have the Apollo and the Artemis missions, it makes sense that the Adonis figure is going to have to die because of the jealousy there. So I just found this interesting. There's ways that this mythologically overlaps with the love that JFK had for the Apollo program and also for his early demise. I had not heard this talked about
Mhm.
anywhere else. It's just interesting. So we're kind of doing the home stretch here.
How about Aphrodite and Hermes? Their
Ooh, what do you know
their
about them? I haven't.
child is hermaphroditus, right? The genderless
Well,
their
Hermes is
union.
Aphrodite and Hermes. You keep talking. I'm gonna pull it up.
So I'm just throwing out ideas here.
Yeah,
But
you're right. The Aphrodite and Hermes had a significant affair, resulting in their androgynous son, Hermaphrodus. Is that right?
yeah.
Hermaphroditus. There we go.
So,
Hermaphroditus.
so it's like the union of polarity,
That's interesting.
the oneness, the Vesica Pisces, right?
Yeah. This is the first time I've come across hermaphroditus. I've talked about Hermes in regards to the divine hermaphrodite, but I did not know about this relationship with Aphrodite. I'm going to look deeper into that. Thank you. Ooh, I've got some homework for next week.
Aphrodite had so much lovers, but I think Hermes is significant, especially in the age of Aquarius. Communication, technology.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Singularity, recursion.
And I'm sure you know this, but the first space program was called the Mercury program.
Is
right?
it? No,
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah. So it's Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo. So that's going to be relevant. Cool. Thank you. I've got a lot of notes for this one. Okay. Quickly, 654.
Apollo is the twin of Artemis, right?
Yes. The solar twin.
Yeah.
This was interesting. I think it's been I was able to have a chance to consult Manly P. Hall's The Secret Teaching of All Ages. And this goes back to the slide earlier about whether or not Adonis was connected to solar imagery, which would be interesting because all the other solar figures that constellate with JFK, King Arthur, Jesus, Apollo, Adonis, and what he does is he pretty effectively points out here how he's connected to Osiris, how he's connected to Mithras, and whether it's through birth dates, how they die, the nature of their death. Right, I said that the tomb and resurrection. So that's something worth exploring. It kind of backs up what Frazer's talking about, and we'll look at deeper when we look at the Osiris chapters. But I finally was able to get into the Manly P. Hall. Ostic, you want to weigh in for a second? You good? You got something to say?
I was just wondering in the last slide about so many Greek myths and even biblical myths being, the narrative starts when someone catches a lady taking a bath. So, so I was thinking, like, this is the this is the primary transgression. You are not supposed to watch someone take a bath. Then I thought about The Shining. Then yeah, then I thought, okay, that
Yes. Yes,
he
he does the same
watches,
thing.
yeah, catches that lady taking a bath. So that was
Well, that's
interesting.
interesting. That is very interesting because oh, I think so. Do you know who the lady in the bathtub? Some people think that's an allusion to. It's an allusion to Diane Arbus, who was Kubrick's photography mentor. She shot for Look magazine while he was at Look magazine. She was a little older, I think, and she made her career like doing like Circus Freaks and things like that. She's the one who came up with the initial twins holding hands, right? And she is a 726er. I think, connect me. She and
She
Kubrick are both born.
died on
She
some Apollo
dies on his
mission.
birthday. Does she die on his birthday? I don't know. Regardless, I think she commits suicide in a bathtub. And so the Diana aspect, the lunar catching her in the bathtub, I think that's going to be relevant to this. I have to think about that a
Yes.
little bit.
Is
Yeah,
it at
nobody
all
seems
Lady
to
of the
talk.
Lake?
That
So,
could be it.
Is
I
it
mean,
related?
there's that as well. I mean, even if you look at the
Why?
bedroom, just uh, just above the bedroom there's a scenery, and in that scenery, in the hotel room, there's a scenery, and in the scenery there's a lake. So I always thought about that this their bedroom is supposed to be that primary unit.
Mm, yes,
um that's the lake, and that's Diana, and that's that King of the Wood.
that's
That's what
great. Ostic.
I thought about.
I think you have to write some kind of essay or treatment about this. I I think you got to do it. I think you're the man for it. I think you're the man for it. Let's go to Buzz real quick. 6:55. Okay. The reason why I'm pointing this out, it's starting to make a little bit more sense to me. So everybody knows the first words that Neil Armstrong said when he stepped on the moon: one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. But Buzz Aldrin had first words or second words, whatever you want to categorize this, on the moon. He talks about, he says, magnificent desolation. And this whole thing about desolation, like, it's such a weird thing to say. Like, you just landed on the moon. And and then he Buzz struggles with alcoholism, like, for years and years and years after landing on the moon. Thinking about this in regards to the Killing of the King ritual, From Ritual to Romance with Jesse Weston, it would make sense that they go to a wasteland, because in the Grail legend or whatever, these knights have to confront the darkest parts of themselves, right? They have to do this confrontation with the shadow and go to this place they don't want to go. Whether the wasteland is within or the wasteland is this environs in which they're searching, it would kind of make sense that the knights have to travel into a wasteland after the king has been laid waste, and then they're the ones retrieving the Grail and bringing it back. So I thought that was interesting, and potentially explains the barrenness, desolation of the moon. It kind of fits for me.
The hero's journey.
Yep. And if we go to 6:56, we've got 5 minutes here. This is all very tentative. I like this image I came up with the 12 moonwalkers around the round table that is the moon. I'll tweak it at some point. And you see this astrologically represented with King Arthur sometimes in the middle. But I was like, chat, just like on a whim, could you like slot the different knights into the different moonwalkers into the different night roles and who they may be? And I don't know if I agree with any of this. Sometimes I view it as kind of a provocative thing. If I want to go deeper into it, I'm not even sure it's possible. I've tried to do this before with like the air quotes 12 archetypes and slating the different moonwalkers into them. I don't know how much rich understanding of their personal psychology one has to have, and understanding, this is the trickster and this is the hero and this is it may be an impossible task. It seems like that a little bit, but it's kind of fun to think about anyway. I might just stick with the number 12 when I get to this, but I thought that was interesting. Feel free to say something as we go. I wanted to talk a little bit about, we got 4 slides left, but we can spill over if we need to, but we have 5 minutes left.
That's a good exercise, basically. I mean, it allows you to go deeper into the texts. Otherwise, you might leave it out. So you should
Yeah.
try it, even if it does not yield many results. You should just immerse yourself maybe for some time.
Yeah.
That helps.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And feel free to say anything if you. I can always hit these slides next week, but I try to get through. All right, we'll go to the next one. Okay, so this was just interesting. I mentioned this at the outset. A possible explanation. I'm not trying to posit here that Jimmy Carter is JFK. It doesn't really matter. What does matter is the fact that they look so similar. And I found like an Esquire article where someone even back in the day was like, in certain shadows and certain lights, Jimmy Carter looks just like JFK. It's so weird. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. It's what's more important to me is the completion of the mythological narrative here, specifically with. It would make sense. King Arthur, when he loses Excalibur, right, and withers, when I think about the 70s, like, why doesn't why do like, they come back from Earth. Why doesn't it? Why things are not good? Like the 70s sucked. Like I wasn't there, but generally, and Carter is considered to be one of the worst presidents. Stagflation, gas prices, et cetera, et cetera. When you looking at it from like the perspective of like King Arthur, it takes time for him to recover. He doesn't like immediately get better from the loss of his power. It takes time for the land to regenerate. And I find that to be kind of uncanny that one of the worst presidents who's associated with the weakening of the land bears this uncanny resistance to JFK. And then it starts roaring back in the Reagan administration. And it makes me wonder if, that's when this cycle is somehow completed, where the vitality of the king is restored with the Holy Grail. And I just thought it's interesting. A lot of people think this MAGA slogan is a Donald Trump thing. It actually at least started with Reagan. This is from the 1980 campaign, where you see the Make America Great Again logo. So Trump just resurrected that. So what was interesting, I was trying to get, I was like, well, was like Reagan like a Republican, like Camelot, situation? And then we were watching Gilmore Girls, and one of the characters goes, no, Camelot is dead. And I was like, okay, I guess not. Do you remember that, Jordan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Vividly. They weren't talking about Reagan, but you asked that.
I asked that, and then it showed up in the episode
very quickly.
By the way, I learned a new Gin Alpha slang. I'll teach it to you guys. Choppelganger.
What is that?
So choppelganger is a combination of doppelganger and chopped. Like when someone says, "Unk, you're chopped," right? Like so it's like a worst version of yourself. So it's like Jimmy Carter was the chopped
Choppelganger. Okay,
choppelganger of JFK. Like has anyone ever told you guys that you look like somebody?
Choppelganger.
Celine, has anybody ever told you look like somebody?
No.
Oh, okay. I don't know. But it's like the poor man's version of the thing, the choppelganger. I'm so impressed that like
so they
kids
come up with these words.
I don't know, but I think I'm impressed that kids even know what a doppelganger is. I don't think I knew what a doppelganger was until I don't know, like college or something. I don't even know if I was familiar with that word. Maybe high school. I don't know. I don't know when I learned that word. Okay. Next. Oh, one more thing. We have 1 minute. This king here, his name is Brian Boru. He's like a 12th century Irish king. And wouldn't you know, he is an ancestor of both Kennedy and Reagan. So both Kennedy and Reagan can trace their lineages, if they go far back enough, to this Irish king, Brian Boru. Okay, Jordan has to go do her thing. It's 1:50. We'll pick up the rest of this time.
Okay, I'll continue with that ancestry thing.
Next time? All right. Hey, Celine, thank you so much for joining us today. Osik, you're always awesome. And Jordan, thank you for holding down all the technical stuff. I'll see you guys next week. Okay?
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.